Hello everyone and welcome. My name is Savannah and today we're going to be making 3 plant-based soups utilizing some fresh summer produce. The first recipe today is going to be a cream of mushroom and leek soup. Almost all soups start with a base of aromatics, and for the first recipe we'll be using celery, leeks, and garlic. Start by removing the roots. And we're only going to be using the bottom portion of the leeks, so you can separate the greens and save those for a different recipe or for an optional topping. Leeks are notoriously dirty, so we're just going to slice them in half, and you can see the dirt there, and we're going to rinse them under some water until they come clean. With the freshly washed leeks, we're just going to cut them into little half moons and then put them aside with the celery. We're also adding garlic, and we're just going to smash it, which helps release a lot of the aromatic compounds and makes the garlic flavor stronger. It also makes it easier to peel. Just remove the base of the garlic, which is where the roots come out. And then just continue chopping until you have nice finely diced garlic. For this recipe, I'm using shiitake mushrooms, which are one of my favorites, and I'm just going to remove the stems and then slice them. If all this chopping seems overwhelming, you can definitely also throw your ingredients into a food processor and blend until they're fairly small. With the mushrooms, you want to make sure you don't get them too small because they will lose a lot of shape and moisture as they cook. And then just set them aside. We're also going to add some dried mushrooms to add some umami to the broth. These are grzyby from a local Polish store that I got, and some bouillon cubes. The cream we're using for this cream of mushroom soup is going to be from cashews, so we're going to boil some water and put those on to soak. So heat up a pan and add some olive oil, and then just make sure that the oil is hot before you start adding your aromatics. Check the heat with your hand or by dropping a piece of a leek in and listening for a sizzle. Seasoning at every stage is really important for plant-based cooking especially, and here the salt will help draw out moisture. Once the leeks and the celery have started to brown, you can go ahead and make a little space, and we're going to add some oil and then add in our mushrooms. Now you're just going to leave this on to sweat it out, and it'll probably get nice and crispy and might stick to the bottom a little bit, but that's okay because we're going to deglaze with just a little bit of white wine. If you don't use alcohol or you don't have wine, you can always use vegetable broth for this. It's going to be the same thing. It's just the liquid is hitting the hot pan and releasing all the brown bits from the bottom that are gonna flavor the soup. After the alcohol is cooked off, we're gonna go ahead and add in our hot water. This is also the stage where we're gonna add in our garlic and our bouillon cubes. Also adding in the dried mushrooms. Now let's check back in on our cashews, and we'll do the wiggle test, and they should be nice and soft. So just strain away any of the soaking liquid and then add it to a food processor. And I'm just seasoning with salt and pepper. Blend as much as you can, and if it's getting stuck, you just add a little bit of hot water. When it's blended enough, it should be really smooth and creamy. I'm gonna add all the cashew cream to the pot and then just stir it in and let it cook for another 10 to 15 minutes. Optionally, you can sear up the leek greens and the sliced mushrooms as a topping. And now the soup should be creamy, luxurious. And if you don't think you like cream of mushroom soup, this is the one to try. This is the one that will change your mind. The next soup we're making is an Italian minestrone soup, and it's chock full of beans and veggies, tons of protein, and really utilizes all the summer flavors of the tomatoes and the zucchini. Of course, we're going to start with aromatics, and we're going to use garlic, onions, and celery for this soup. Start by slicing your onion in half. It's going to make it a lot easier to peel. And I'm going to top it and then just peel the skins off. Now we're just going to make long vertical slices, and these are going to be about the size of the pieces that you want. So I like them fairly small. And just make sure that you're not going all the way to the root, because then your whole onion is going to fall apart. And then just slice it the other way into nice cubes. For the celery, I'm just going to slice it into strips and then stack them all together and dice them into cubes. Again, if this chopping seems daunting, definitely throw this all in a food processor. Now place all of your aromatics to the side, and we're going to go heat up a pan with some oil. Once the pan is nice and hot, we're going to add in our celery and our onions. We're listening for that satisfying sizzle. Whenever I'm sauteing onions, I always add a little bit of salt because it's going to draw the moisture out and help them get nice and caramelized and golden. At this stage, we want to add in our herbs and spices so that they have time to bloom in the oil and release a lot of their flavors. For this recipe, I'm using an Italian seasoning mix, parsley, and some paprika. Once all those spices have bloomed and you can smell them, you can go ahead and add in your carrots. I already prepped these ones ahead of time, but you can also buy frozen carrots that have already been chopped. Once your onions are translucent and your spices are smelling fragrant, you can go ahead and add in your liquid, which in this case is going to be tomatoes. You can also do part vegetable broth and tomatoes. I just happen to have frozen ones from my garden, which are a little more liquidy. You're now going to add in 2 cans of beans. I used kidney beans and a white bean, and just make sure you rinse these underwater before you add them to the soup. After cooking for about 10 to 15 minutes, we're going to add in our zucchini. Zucchini cooks a lot faster than the other ingredients, so we add it at the end so it doesn't turn mushy. I also needed to add a bit more water because the veggies had really soaked it up, so I also added in some bouillon cubes for extra flavor. I would highly encourage you to taste your food as you go and really season to your preferences. And finally, I played it with some pasta and enjoy. This last soup is going to be the easiest recipe of the day and is definitely one of my go-tos. We're going to be making a red lentil tomato bisque. Start by peeling and slicing your carrots, and you can chop off the ends, feed them to a friend. No waste here. Then we're going to go ahead and quarter our onions. Very minimal chopping in this recipe. Add olive oil to a pan. Let your pan get nice and hot, and then put the onions face down, and we're gonna let these get nice and seared, almost blackened. This dark color will definitely help to add a depth of flavor to the broth. Once the onions are nice and caramelized, you can toss in your chunks of carrots and the garlic. I'm using a spice mix that was gifted to us from family in Poland. Not quite sure what was in here, but you could definitely use Italian seasoning instead. I'm also adding parsley and some cayenne pepper. Once the herbs and spices have bloomed, you can go ahead and add in your red lentils. These are some that I soaked overnight, which helps them become more digestible and leads to less bloating. You can also use canned or dried if that's what you have. Just be sure to rinse them beforehand. Here I'm gonna add defrosted frozen tomatoes from my garden because I had a lot of them. But you can definitely also use canned or fresh tomatoes diluted with vegetable broth. I'm adding in some of those same dried mushrooms to add another depth of flavor to the soup. After tasting, I decided it needed a little bit more flavor, so I added another bouillon cube. Once the carrots are soft and all the other veggies are cooked, you can fish the mushrooms out, and then we're going to use an immersion blender or a stand blender if that's what you have, and blend it up until it's smooth. And that's it. It's ready to plate and eat and enjoy. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed today's video. Please like, subscribe, and we will see you next time.